Brockhampton are a hip-hop group, also known as a boy band, that broke onto the scene last year in a huge way, bigger than any hip-hop group has done in a freaking long time. They really shook up the year 2017 in a really good way, actually, because even though they got really overhyped at one point, they were still dropping really good music. They were getting the Odd Future label thrown at them by quite a few people, but the one thing that didn't make sense about that label is the fact that Odd Future didn't really keep up the quality with any of their releases, and you know, Brockhampton came through with 3 back-to-back albums that were all at least decent and good. Sure, I'll admit I've cooled down on them over the past year, to be honest. I still think Saturation 3 is a great release, but Saturation 2 has some of my least favourite songs from them on there. Some of my favourites, like some of my absolute favourites from Saturation 2, absolutely. But really low points I didn't particularly enjoy. And then Saturation 1, which was my favourite for a while, ended up souring a little bit on me as well. It has, again, some of their best songs, but there are some duds on there, to be honest. Honestly, if you had the best moments from Saturation 1 and the best moments from Saturation 2, it would have just been a way better album to put together than having them separate ones, because I just think there are too many duds on each of them, whereas Saturation 3 I think is the most concise and consistent release, so I would say it's the best. And besides all that, things have really changed. I mean, since then we heard the whole Amir Van situation, all the abuse scandals that came through about Amir Van, and you know, Brockhampton was sort of on the edge for a little while. They were playing live shows, and you know, I think there were a few times where they were on stage and got really like emotional because they weren't really sure what to do about the situation. They were being like heckled by fans all over social media, you know, as if like it was their fault about what Amir had done. Yeah, it was just a bit of a shit show. So of course Amir then had to leave. Album was cancelled, album was postponed. I think they scrapped, I'm pretty sure they actually scrapped pretty much all the material from what was going to be called Puppy, I think it was. And yeah, we were kind of kept on the edge wondering if they were still going to stick around, and then they did. They stayed together and got onto RCA Records, which is a really huge thing. Now the thing is, during all this time, people hadn't suddenly given up on Brockhampton. Their fans were growing like crazy anyway. They got to a point where stan culture was, you know, entering the fan base. A lot of people found it really annoying, but you know, who really cares? The albums are still well received, you know, no one suddenly decided they're all terrible just because of that whole Amir Van situation. You know, their audience was growing like crazy. They had critically acclaimed albums. They had everything going for them. I'm pretty sure the boy band image that they labeled themselves with heightened them in a huge way. They had it all, to be honest. They were set to release their best album. They were the Leicester City of the Premier League. Yeah, sure. Were they the best around? Probably not. But they had the team spirit. They had everything going for them. It was theirs to lose, and they didn't lose it. They kept it up the whole season and defied all the odds and friggin' changed the game. Just like with Brockhampton, you know, it's essentially theirs to lose at this point. They have it all. They signed to RCA Records. You know, what could honestly go wrong? Now, for a lot of people, not a lot, you know. A lot of people will regard this album as a great release from Brockhampton, and that's totally fine. But for me, they aren't Leicester City on this occasion. Now the thing is that they did get rid of the weakest link, to be honest, Amir Van. Saturation 3 would have been a near 9 out of 10, to be honest, like if Amir wasn't there, because he slowed down the flow of that album like a motherfucker. Every time he came on, I put on my clothes, I check out the hotel. I'm a black man with a deadly weapon. I've got the same flow. I don't know how to change it up. I start every line with the word I'm boring. And now that's gone, you know, the Amir Van flow has been taken out of Brockhampton, probably for the best. I think there are so many issues with this, to be honest. Iridescence is quite a mess. Like track to track, I don't really see how it can be any other way. I mean, so many of these tracks transition in such an awkward way from one another. Like take the opening track, New Orleans. a frigging like sharp as hell banger that all the members come through and friggin' kill it on their verses. I mean, sure, I don't really feel as though that the togetherness is there on this track. You know, like on the Saturation trilogy, I felt like every member, you know, linked up together so well. Like take a track like Boogie, you know, you go from one verse and it goes into the next verse and the transition is wonderful. Whereas on New Orleans, I can't really help but feel like it's like one verse and then the next one is kind of tacked on next to it, and then the next one is like tacked on next to it. But the beat is still banging, but then we go into the next track and, you know, the flow completely changes. Thug Life is essentially a Najabi song, shout out to Josh the Blogger, just with pitch shifted vocals laid over the top of it. And I can't help but feel like the mesh and the melding is cracked a little bit. I don't feel like these vocals fit this beat. And then obviously, you know, it's a completely different change from the first track. So it just jars me a little bit. And this happens quite a lot on the album, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we get to Wait, you know, this really friggin' great song. The lyrics on this track are potent as hell. Everyone's just going through this like personal trauma. They're all discussing like the fame. Dom does this excellent verse about how, like, you know, he doesn't see his parents enough, and this is all because of like what the fame has done to him. Joba comes through as well, sharp as hell. Kevin kills it as always. And then we go into District, and I'm sorry, but I just can't enjoy District at all. Honestly, that transition between those two tracks, I cannot believe how it just sounded okay to do. Like, it really sounded like a mess to me when it went into it. The beat is like friggin' fire as hell on District. You know, there's this really buzzing synth line. It gets a bit annoying, to be honest, but it's like all the vocals are like shifted constantly. Yeah, the pitch shifting, man, just really got to me on this one. They've done it loads before, you know, it was on all the Saturation albums. It was probably the most prevalent on Saturation 3, but it added to the atmosphere in a really nice way, whereas this time around it's just become a bit of a gimmick. Like, they're just literally just like there's like a slider of the pitch and they're pretty much just like pulling it up and down every so often for a verse randomly, and I just don't get it. I mean, I think it's Bareface and Kevin at the end of the track District. Fuck, man. Look, if you enjoyed that, that's totally fine, but it really fucking... Ugh. It's way too much. Like, it's just way too much. Like, it's okay to do occasionally, but if you're going to do it multiple times in a song, I don't know how that's going to pass well. Like, I just don't see it. That's not even touching on tracks like Something About Him, where the lyrical theme on the track is so, like, cute and adorable. Kevin always comes through with his really, like, touching lyrics. I can't deny the theme of this track, but, like, the way it starts off with the pitched up vocals again, like, oh... why is it necessary? If you got rid of that, your song would be fine as it is. What is this gimmick for? What does it add to the album or to the songs? I don't know. And then Something About Him transitions to Where the Cash At, which is actually one of my favourite tracks here, because Merlin's just firing away on this track. Whenever Merlin comes through, I can't help but smile. This guy is fucking great. But yeah, I mean, it's just him the whole way through. The beat is hard. It just sounds like a really good, like, Brockhampton song, you know? But does it really fit in the flow of the album? I mean, if it does to you, look, hats off to you if you like this kind of all over the place flow. But it ain't for me, man. I mean, it works occasionally. I was trying to think of albums where it did work, and I was talking to some people, and of course Sophie's latest album came up, and that flow was a bit all over the place. But the thing is, the quality of the songs did remain really good throughout the album, so the flow wasn't a major issue. But when you're going from, like, really weak songs like Berlin, you know, to then, like, Where the Cash At and stuff like that, it kind of just doesn't work. And obviously in between those two songs there was Something About Him, which to me was really bad. So, like, it's just kind of all over the place. I do like the song Tape. I think the beat on this one is pretty good. It doesn't really abuse the pitch shifting like much of this album does. it's genuinely just a solid track that I can't really complain too much about. And then we go to Je veux, I don't know, it's French, Je veux, I don't know. And this is one of the most interesting tracks, to be honest. Like, the beat on this one, holy shit, like, is fucking really one of the dirtiest beats on this entire album, and dirtier than anything they've ever done before. This is like the opening track again, you know, with that kind of really grimy, rough, hard as nails type production that like works quite well for them, surprisingly, because prior to this album, you know, they were doing kind of bouncy, upbeat, fun, you know, hip-hop bangers, but like here they've just like turned it down completely and gone for something really, really rough. And when it comes to Joba's verse, he sounds like a maniac, man. Like, it was really hard to listen to at first because he sounded so insane, but like the more I listened, I actually do appreciate it more. But yeah, man, oof. Fuck, he made Merlin sound normal. How does anyone do that? And this is one of the few times on the album where the transition to the next song works perfectly, because it goes into Honey. It's got a really like hard knocking beat, kind of boom bappy inspired, and Honey is great for like half of the song, and then it gets ruined by the pitch shifted vocals, and I'm kind of just ready to skip. I just don't know why they slowed it completely down to a halt and then just got rid of the great beat that was riding the song for the first half. It was just a really weird decision for me. Like, I don't know what the motives were behind it. I do kind of think there is a theme in this production throughout the album though, you know. They are going really heavy into mental health across this album, and you know, especially Joe, but all his verses are really heavy in terms of content. Like that line where he's talking about you know, I gave you the noose, but you know, I didn't make you hang yourself. I think he says that on Berlin, and you know, I think he's referencing himself here, just talking about like, you know, his own inner thoughts battling each other. So maybe in that sense, the hectic, all over the place production works in the sense that you're entering their minds. You know, their minds are chaotic, their minds don't make sense, and a lot of these beats kind of don't make sense. They transitioned into one another in a very weird way, just like if you were, you know, going through depression, anxiety, anything else, you know, nothing in your brain would make sense, and it's kind of all over the place. I mean, that's just my interpretation, because I can't really think about how or why else they would do so many weird, odd things that change up each track like the way that they did. I mean, if my interpretation is completely wrong, then I wouldn't have a clue as to why tracks like Honey, you know, do what they do and just go in this really weird experimental shift that just feels not really well thought out. Honestly, so much of this album feels that way to me. Like, it's experimental, but like it's just a bit of a failed experiment. Like, some ideas work really well and then, you know, it gets kind of shoved out of the way for something else to replace it, and it feels a bit awkward. It doesn't quite flow in a very, you know, album fashion type way. You know, I appreciate their ambition for sure. I mean, I'm pretty much repeating myself here, but tracks like Vivid have that exact same issue that I've been talking about, you know, where everything's going so well. Dom McGlennon comes through with a fucking great verse. Matt sounds great on the track too. Then we get to Bareface right at the end, who kills everything with that vocal thing. Hats off to Brockhampton, you know, for giving Bareface something different. I mean, on the 1990 singles, they were sort of experimenting with his vocals, and that felt quite awkward, to be honest. On the Saturation trilogy, he was just the closing track guy who put in like beautiful vocal performances. But yeah, on this album, they've essentially just thrown his vocals out the window just to replace them with a chipmunk version of Bareface. It's Chipmunk Face now. Man, what happened to Bareface? He was great before, what are you doing? Yeah, Vivid is this like really chaotic song as well, you know, so much is going on in the beat, you know, these really weird like noises in the background. and it just works. But like the last 45 seconds ish, I could just throw away. It could just be me that doesn't like this pitch shifting thing. I mean, if so, then I could just say it's not for me. But it never really grated on me so much on the older Brockhampton material. I just think the usage of it this time never fits the styles of the songs. Take tracks like Bleach Rental, you know, the vibe of the song is way more chilled out. So you throw in those like pitched vocals and it just fits the atmosphere. Whereas here, I don't think they're using it right at all. I mean, sure, Bareface isn't only, you know, doing this on the whole album. San Marcos, you know, we get the old Bareface doing his thing. Some really lovely verses coming through from Joba and Kevin. Again, you know, just dealing with that deep material, that heaviness that I really think they're really good at. They're really good at tackling these sort of issues. Dom as well comes through with a great verse. I like Joba a lot on this album, you know. I really think like he's taking his mental health issues to another level. Like he's really tackling them in such an interesting way. Like listening to him talk through his problems. Like he is so versatile in this album. Like he can go from a wild, manic, just friggin' insane man to the more subdued type stuff on the track like San Marcos, and every time he kills it doing what he's doing. But then right at the end of the song there's this like London gospel choir feature, and yeah, I can't help but feel like it sounds so cheesy. Like it might work in a live setting, but I don't know, when I heard it come on I was just like, are you kidding me? I want more out of life than this. I found that so corny and cheesy. Like, yeah, I know if you enjoy that, that's totally fine, but it just didn't work for me at all. It just doesn't fit to me at all. Like, you can't have a gospel choir on an album where you're fucking throwing in these hard-hitting beats, this dizzying production the whole way through, and then you just throw in this acoustic-y like rap track that I just don't really think fits the mix at all. I mean, it does lead on to Tonya in a pretty nice way. Tonya's a pretty nice track, you know. I think they did a lot of work on improving the mixing, because like they played it live not too long ago and I thought the vocals sounded all out of place, but they've really done a good job of improving that and making it into a really pretty top quality track. I do think there are some vocal issues on the track though at points. I think Matt sounds a bit out of place, to be honest, but you know, it gets past that and everything else sounds really quite nice. It's really organic sounding too. I mean, it's a pretty big change of pace, considering everything else in this album sounds quite robotic and all over the place and like out of this world, and then you get this really like soft moment of, you know, San Marcos and then Tonya. It's quite nice change of pace, to be honest. We do then close off the album with Fabric. Pretty cool way to end off the album. It's quite an experimental, odd track, not too much going on to the point where it sounds like an absolute clusterfuck, but it is quite an interesting closing track actually. But yeah, even though the last few songs do have quite a lot of positivity about them that I can take away, they still have issues like the closing moments of San Marcos, some mixing issues on Tonya. You know, like, they're positives, but it's nowhere near the heights of what they've been able to do before. Like, I can't help but think this is easily their weakest album so far. Like, I'm not counting before Saturation, to be honest, because I never checked those out, but I'm talking from Saturation onwards. Iridescence is not at the quality of those albums. I just don't see it. I mean, sure, if you're into experimental music, if you like the pitch shifting, you know, constantly on every track, then it's definitely going to be for you. But yeah, other than the lyrical themes on this album, I can't really take too much away. I mean, for me, Wait and Je veux, like, the few songs on this album that I could genuinely return to out of context of the album and get some enjoyment out of them, because, you know, at least if I listen to Wait on its own, I won't have that weird transition into District, you know? But I can see I'm going to be in the minority here. I think a lot of people aren't going to like my opinion on this album, but just try and hear me out here. You know, I'm not just being negative for the sake of it. I just genuinely had a hard time with this album. It's really quite disappointing for me. I do think they are genuinely doing pretty interesting stuff. It just was an experiment that kind of went a bit wrong to me. And you know, if this is an album you love, totally fine. I mean, that's okay, but it's just nah, not for me. I've heard too many great albums this year to even consider this one in an album of the year discussion, to be honest. Yeah, I'm gonna go 5.5 out of 10. I'm sorry. Let me know your thoughts. I think it's going to be a polarizing album. I do think a lot of people will have mixed opinions, but probably overall the general consensus will be that this is a good album, and that's cool. But yeah, not to my eyes. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Comment below. Try not to unsubscribe and get angry at me. Have a good day. Yeah, have a good day. Bye.